Well, it's 2007, and here we are. We're back for another year, and God willing, and Happy New Year to you. Hope everything has gone well and continues to go well. But we have a number of stories that we do want to get to tonight. Many of them you may have missed because of your hectic pre-Christmas and pre-New Year's activity, and so we want to touch on them and discuss them a little bit here tonight. And one of them that we want to update you on, that you might recall, some of these stories we discussed in the past, and it hasn't been on the mainstream news media until just recently. And one is where Burton Mayor Charles Smiley, the outrageous political fix he put in to cause the unprecedented action of arresting his political opponent, Burton City Council President Charles Cross, on a trumped-up criminal charge of violating the Burton City Charter, because Smiley says Cross didn't ask him for permission to talk to the city clerk on city business. Cross apparently approached her about the minutes from the last meeting because he was getting ready for a new meeting, and he got arrested for that. He was charged with 3 counts. All of them, if convicted, could put him in jail for 90 days. So it was a serious thing, a serious charge. Now, we told you at the time we mentioned this to you that, this case would not see the light of day in a courtroom because of its lack of merit. Just last week, the case was dismissed for lack of merit. Well, what's so disturbing about the matter? The charter says, and I think the language is very important because that's what the intention of the Constitution is. You must strictly enforce the language of any criminal charge you're going to make. So you can't try to interpret the opposite of what the language says. But the language in the charter says you cannot demand that an administrative staff person do something. Now, the 2 clerks who were asked by Cross for the minutes of the last council meeting both swore under oath in a statement they gave that Cross never demanded the records, but conversely was very nice about it and requested it, and apparently they were joking and laughing, and that was it. And he got arrested for it. Now, you have to look at it this way. As a prosecutor of 23 years, I can tell you, an unbiased prosecutor would have declined to issue any warrant in this case. That's the first step. The prosecutor's got to look at it. There was no demand, but they decided to interpret his request that the women in the clerk's office said was not threatening or intimidating as a demand, and therefore they were claiming he violated the statute. Now, keep in mind that the prosecutor in this case was he was handpicked really by Smiley through the city attorney. The special prosecutor that he had placed there had worked for Smiley and his people in the past. And then he was also an individual that was looking for the city attorney's job last year when it was up for grabs, and Cross stopped him from getting it and worked with another group on the council to appoint the present city attorney. So there was many reasons why this special prosecutor should have really disqualified himself. Then Smiley had, he thought, in line the district judge. The district judge was a member over the years of the Stanley's political machine. He was always supported by, Smiley's political machine, and he was always supported by Smiley. So, in this case, in my humble opinion, I thought that what Smiley thought, he had all the ducks in a row of railroading Cross. Now the coup de grace in this case, to any claim of legitimacy by Smiley into his arrest of Cross, went out the window when an inter-office communication memo surfaced that was issued by Smiley in the past, which would allow you to contact administrative people under certain circumstances. Here's what the memo in effect says. It says, it's to the Burton City Council, which Cross was a member of, from Charles Smiley, Mayor. Council members that have a question about agenda items for planning, zoning, parks, and rec, or city council meetings have a right to contact the administrator of that department. In this case, the clerk of the city handles the minutes of the meeting, and that's what he was looking for. Now, it seems to me it's pretty clear that's what Cross was trying to get. And under this memo, he was entitled to do it. But notwithstanding, they arrested him. Talk about politics. Now the second part of this coup was that the district judge that was Smiley's friend and Smiley thought he had in his pocket did not perform as planned. The judge obviously thought more of his oath of office than his political contacts to Smiley. The judge let Smiley know and his people know that he was going to dismiss this case if Smiley insisted to go forward to a trial. Now here's what the Flint Journal head said about this case after it was dismissed. Also on our mind, this was December 14th, shortly after it was dismissed, and it said, put it in perspective, vindicated. Charles Cross now says he will work hard in 2007 to change the Burton City Charter, which tripped up the councilman when he made a mundane business request of city employees and found himself facing misdemeanor charges, now dismissed. The charges seem silly to begin with, and of course political. Even the Journal recognizes that. Then it goes on to say, Councilman and mayoral ally Danny Wells, meanwhile, calls the dropping of the charge, quote, pitiful and a travesty. He's still not satisfied. He still thinks he should have gone to court on this and hopefully been convicted on such a trumped-up charge. But that's Wells. He's Smiley's rubber stamp down there in the council, still left there. The rest of them were overthrown, thrown out. You know, the tragedy here is we have the highest elected official in the city, the mayor, trying to use his political power to railroad someone who is completely innocent. You know, when you think back in your history books, this is one of the reasons we fought the Revolutionary War. You might remember, as I say in your history books, that the English Star Chambers was eliminated, and specifically eliminated in our Constitution back in the late 1700s. And you know, in the days of the Star Chamber, a person was guilty before he had any trial. There was no trial. It was decided not by the court of law, but by a king who decided anyone was guilty if he wanted them to be guilty on suspicion, hearsay, a mere whim. This would be followed by a sham procedure before the infamous Star Chamber, where a person's guilt had been predetermined. Now this, as I say, procedure was repudiated by the framers of our Constitution. Now, here we have a fellow that, in the Cross case, he's trying to fire and arrest and try this individual without any basis at all. Very similar to the Star Chamber. But for the court's resistance, in all likelihood could have succeeded. This is kind of scary stuff in this day and age. Something like this almost succeeded here. Now, here's the anticlimax here. There was a request for attorney fees, first by the prosecutor who brought the case as directed by Smiley under, no basis at all for it. But he was Smiley's guy, and the fix was in. And I don't know if the prosecutor was aware of that, but the implications were bad. The impression it gave, knowing the background of the prosecutor that was appointed and his relationship with Smiley. And I know the prosecutor that was appointed, a nice fellow, and I don't know whether he was influenced by that, by the fact that Smiley wanted to do something to Cross or not. But the fact of the matter, it had a bad smell all the way along. But anyway, now they submit, Smiley submits a bill for attorney fees for this prosecutor, and Cross submits him for his attorney that he had to hire to defend these phony charges by Smiley. Smiley okays the fees for the prosecutor and vetoes the fees for Cross's attorney. I think, something like that is, it shows us the contempt Smiley has for the principle of justice and fairness. You have to remember that the criminal justice system is intended to seek justice, not to settle political feuds. Unlike what Smiley and his people tried here. They don't seem to understand that. But that's an example where he wants to pay his attorney and not Cross's. This is what some people call a slap lawsuit, where they bring a lawsuit because they can afford to do it. Smiley brings this lawsuit because he knows he's not going to pay, because he's hiring a special assistant or a special prosecutor to prosecute the case, and the city's going to pay him. But Cross is now hiring his attorney, and he wants to punish him by making him pay high attorney fees. That's ridiculous, and that's what happened in this case. And the court won out, justice won out, the case was dismissed, and now we're at this point where Smiley gets his attorney paid for, and Cross is up in out in left field on whether he will get his attorney fees paid for. We'll wait and see on that. Here's another story we've been telling you was going to happen And we've been telling you the last 3 or 4 months, and we're the only station that's been doing that. And that's the arrest of Lucas Anthony. You know, he's the pedophile that was hired by the Flint Board of Education as the #2 man for the school board, you know, without any record check as required by state law for school employees throughout the state. Now, we have a number of descriptions of this, and I think they're all important, but let's start with Channel 12's report on this.
Genesee County. It is an update to an ABC 12 investigation. The Genesee County prosecutor has decided to move forward with the charges against Julius Anthony. Anthony left the district in September after it was discovered he was charged with molesting a 3-year-old boy in 1996. ABC 12's Matt Franklin joining us live now with more on the story. Matt?
And Karen, the Genesee County prosecutor believes Julius Anthony is in Georgia right now. He is giving him 2 weeks to turn himself in to authorities. The prosecutor is charging him with 2 counts for failing to register on the state sex offender registry when he moved from New York to Michigan. The second count is for failing to register when he moved from Grand Blanc to Flint. There's also a charge for failing to alert authorities when he moved out of the state after he left the district. These are 4-year felonies. Also, Anthony is charged for violating the School Safe Zone Act, which is a 1-year misdemeanor. The former administrator pled guilty to a sex crime in 1996, and the prosecutor believes visited several schools in the district. However, because of that charge, Anthony should not have been around children. Now, the prosecutor, along with the Genesee County Sheriff, announced these charges this morning. Anthony was accused of molesting a 3-year-old boy in Fulton County, Georgia in 1996. However, 4 years later, he pleaded guilty to a lesser charge. The sheriff also released details of a polygraph test that Anthony took in Georgia following the incident. According to the sheriff, Anthony failed the test. Anthony was brought to the district by Superintendent Walter Milton as a consultant. The two were close friends and even owned a consulting firm together. In July of 2005, Anthony then moved into an administration position with the district. However, he resigned after a background check found he had been charged with a sex crime.
This is a man who did not register in Georgia. We don't know if he registered in New York, and he stopped in New York for work at some point in time. And then he came to us and didn't register here, and he was supposed to. And even though he's gone from our jurisdiction now, that doesn't mean we're going to drop the ball.
Now, we talked to Anthony's attorney this morning by phone. She says she plans to release a statement later this afternoon. Also, we talked to Superintendent Walter Milton, and he says the district has no comment about today's developments. We'll have much more beginning today on ABC 12 News, first at 4. In the news, you're Matt Franklin, ABC 12 News.
Well, that was a report on the arrest. And here's a Journal, front page, ex-school official faces 3 felonies. And it talks about Anthony, a longtime friend of Flint Superintendent Walter Milton, Jr., resigned from the Flint School District back in September, I think it was September 11th or 12th, something like that. And then it, you know, when you consider what happened here, you have to wonder, how could this have happened? Excuse me. You know, we have a state law that requires the person be fingerprinted and his record checked. And that law went into effect over a year ago, January 1st, 2006. Anthony was working for the school board at that time. First as a contract employee and then later as an actual employee. Either way, the statute covers him. Now, Channel 66 had a pretty good report here I want you to look at, and their spin on it is a little different, but it also has a lot more of what Bob Pickell, the sheriff, had to say about this situation. Can you run that one, please?
Good evening. I'm Katie O'Merrill.
And I'm Sam Merrill. Now that man is facing criminal charges. Julius Anthony is his name. He's the former director of curriculum for the Flint schools, suspended, later resigned after it was revealed that he pleaded guilty to a child sex charge in Georgia 10 years ago. And now Genesee County is taking action. Here's TV5's David Custer.
We believe that we gave him ample opportunity to register.
It's not over for former school administrator Julius Anthony. Anthony resigned from the district in September after it was revealed on his background check that he had a child molestation charge on his record. TV5 obtained the initial police report from Fulton County, Georgia. Now Genesee County prosecutor David Layton is charging Anthony for failing to register as a sex offender while he was here in mid-Michigan, and he's slapping him with 3 felony counts and 1 misdemeanor.
The crime for which he was convicted in Georgia was a crime that was substantially similar to a crime that in Michigan you must register for.
We tried to catch up with Anthony when his family helped him move out of his apartment in October.
Are you unloading Mr. Anthony's house? Are you unloading his apartment? You better get out my face.
The sheriff's department who conducted the investigation says Anthony violated the school safety zone, having an office here in the administration building near his longtime friend Walter Milton.
It's a concern when you have an educator like Dr. Milton vouching for the character of Julius Anthony, and this is what we get.
Sheriff Pickell concerned about Milton insisting the district bring Anthony on board. They did, and Anthony worked here several months as a consultant, meaning he didn't have to have a background check, and his past wasn't revealed until the district made him a full-time employee this summer. Milton, a longtime friend and co-worker of Anthony's, told us today over the phone he knew nothing about Julius's past, and he has no comment on today's events.
There may be an appearance, and I think there is an appearance on the part of some people in this community that are saying what Dr. Milton did in effect was aid and abet a sexual molester in the schools.
Now, a letter has been sent to Anthony's attorneys, and he has 14 days to turn himself in, and if he doesn't respond, the Sheriff's Department says they are going to begin extradition to bring him back here to Genesee County. In the newsroom, David Custer, WNEM TV5.
The sheriff also says that Anthony failed a polygraph after he was accused of molesting that 3-year-old Georgia boy back in 1996. Anthony's attorneys say that he will return to Genesee County to face those charges.
This hour, more.
Now, here's a guy that has been associated with Milton for 7 years. They lived together in Missouri, they lived together in New York, they lived together in this area. And he says he knew nothing about this. They began a partnership in 2000, the year that Anthony was sentenced in this charge. Now, you notice that Pickell, he raises some pertinent matters with his comments on Channel 12 and 66, and in the Journal I'll look at here in a minute. But let's look at, for a few minutes, to see if the sheriff is making a reasonable conclusion about Milton and whether he knew, because if he did know, it's a cover-up. It's an obstruction of justice. So it's serious. Now, here's something that Milton knew because he participated in this, and that Anthony knew because he was number 2 in charge. The law in question went into effect January 1st of 2006. Last year, it's in effect for a year. And it was in effect for 9 months before it was discovered that Anthony had a record. And I'll tell you how that was discovered in just a moment. But the law requires schools to fire any employee found convicted of a crime that will put them on the state list of registered sex offenders and certain offenses involving children. Clearly, this crime that Anthony committed in Georgia, failed a polygraph on, pleaded guilty to, was a crime that should have been, is on the sex register of the state of Michigan, and he should have registered himself. So then it goes on to say, and this is in the article of December 26, 2005, in anticipation the law was going to be put into effect. It says this: another unanswered question is over who must be fingerprinted. And then it goes on to say, it's clear that the law covers all full and part-time employees and all regular contractors. Remember, Anthony came in here in August 2005 and remained a contractor past January 1st, 2006, which this law covered, and goes to about August of 2006, and then he becomes a regular employee. At no time was he printed. And it says here, the new law also requires employees to notify their district within 10 days if they are arrested. So now you go to August 17th, 2006, and it says, by law, the board and Superintendent Walton Milton have to sign off on continuing employment of workers listed in the State Department of Education as having convictions. The list was released in June. Now, it goes on in that article to say, Milton is describing the meeting where these 5 or 6 employees that were found to have a record that were working for the city of Flint, a custodian and what have you. He says this, according to the Flint Journal. Milton described the meetings with the employees as emotional, but said the board listened and weighed the impact of their conviction on the job with the district. He said he agreed with the board's decision to keep the workers. They had stellar track records while they'd been employed with us, Milton said. And then it says no employee of the group, the 5 or 6 that were interviewed, was convicted of a sex offense, which requires immediate firing under the new law. So we know that Milton and Anthony were aware of this law. Milton, he participated in the interviews of these people. He knew how significant the law was. It's specifically what it said about sex offenders and felons. And then on September 14th, the head of this article is in the Flint Journal. It says the head of the Flint Teachers Union said he believes the Board of Education disregarded its employment policies when it hired a longtime friend and former business partner of School Superintendent Walter Milton as administrator. United Teachers of Flint, which represents 1,250 Flint employees, accused the district of holding teachers and administrators to a different hiring standard. Absolutely, that's exactly what was happening here. Then he went on to say, he said, this is the union man, he said that the district's response indicates the school system has no such documents on Anthony, nor did he have fingerprint records of Milton on file, which was required by law. Now, throughout this whole thing, the person in charge of the fingerprinting for the Flint Board of Education kept bugging Milton that he had not been fingerprinted as required by law and that he better be doing it. He must have told him 3, 4, 5 times to get it done over that 9-month period. But anyway, so we have that situation in these articles, and we know that he was familiar with the law. He participated in enforcing it. So now you have to ask, the disclosure on Milton having no record check, and when they record checked Anthony, they found the sex offense, would never have been known, possibly, it would seem, unless the school or the teachers union filed a Freedom of Information request, and when they kept being put off, they told the school board that they were going to go to court to force them to abide by the Freedom of Information Act, which they have a right to do and which the court would have required to do. That's the only reason that Milton submitted his fingerprints and the truth was learned about Anthony. And you have to ask, why was Superintendent Milton so defiant to give his fingerprints? He apparently had nothing to hide on his record. Could it be that if they printed the other guy, Anthony, that they would have found the crime that Milton was aware of, and that's why he may not have been abiding by the printing. But there were only 2 in the district for 9 months until the school teachers union got after them. Now, if Milton, of course, agrees to be printed and his record checked, as the school administration people who are responsible for that wanted him to do on a number of occasions, and he just disregarded it, it would seem he recognizes the fact that they would have to print Anthony and the cat would be out of the bag. And I think that's what Pickel is saying. You know, fair inferences would indicate that Milton had to know about this, because all the circumstances seem to point to him trying to cover the thing up. And then we have the Journal's article, which drew a little controversy from from all the board members. It says, Milton should have known Anthony's history, sheriff. And it goes on to say, this is what Sheriff Pickel says, giving Julius Anthony a job in the Flint School District was like putting a fox in the hen house, Sheriff Pickel said. Now, board member Herbert Cleves said it was overkill for the prosecutor and the sheriff to hold a news conference to announce the charges. Now, what do you mean? This was the biggest story in Flint. According to the Flint Journal this past Sunday, stream of Flint school controversies is top story in the county, in the newspaper this year. And they're not supposed to call a news conference when they arrest this guy? The reason, it would seem to me, from listening to what they're saying, the board members, is they want this thing to die and go away. They'd like to get rid of it because it points out their incompetency. You know, hey, it's not a question of a policy. It's a question of state law. They didn't follow the state law. And then Herbert Cleves, whom I know and like personally, and I'm sure has the kids' best interests at heart, says if Pickel feels he has to arrest Julius, charge him and all that his business, but don't throw the superintendent under the bus. Well, I think it's fair to say to the public and the superintendent, look, you've known this guy for 7 years. You've lived with him in New York, and especially from the time that this happened, you started a business with him at the same year, and you don't know anything about this? I think that's a fair question. And here's what Cleves says: I don't have the time nor the energy to continue to be out in the news media about Anthony. Why not? You know, this is serious as hell. And then he goes on to say, which I think is kind of stupid, I'm pretty sure there are more drug houses that need to be raided, and the prosecutor and the sheriff should be worried about doing that. Well, I don't think there's any question that the sheriff and the prosecutor have brought lots of actions on drug houses. Now, if Mr. Cleves knows of some that they should raid, he should tell them where they are. Now, I've talked to the prosecutor and to the sheriff, and they've never heard from Cleves on drug houses. So, you take these wild shots in the dark. Here's what Pickel said. He said, and this is Pickel quoting Milton, I need Julius to be part of my team. I need to reform the schools. The men had been friends and business partners previously, Pickell said. So Milton should have known about Anthony's conviction and the fact that Anthony didn't really have a master's degree as he claimed in his job application. You know, that's what's wrong here. Besides lying about any criminal convictions, he lied about his education. He had no master's degree. Then he lied about his experience and said he'd been a school teacher for about 12, 13 years, 10 years, something like that. And it turned out he was nothing but a substitute teacher. His whole application was a lie. And Milton didn't know that, didn't know there was lies. These were all lies. Lived with him for 7 years. Worked with him for 7 years. Come on. Then it went on. Then, because he's getting heat about, you know, here you are living with him and you don't know any of this stuff, he kind of overdoes it here. He says, my wife and I allowed him to stay in our apartment. We had an extra bedroom for 2 weeks, he said. I had no idea of his criminal history with Anthony when I was made aware of it. Now, that's something you have to be concerned about. Why would he say, try to just talk about the Grand Blanc contact he had with them living together for 2 weeks? That's to, I'm sure, to indicate he didn't have time to get into his personal business. But what he forgot to tell you is that he lived with him in New York and in Missouri. And they've been living together for off and on for 7 years. So if in 2 weeks he couldn't have learned about it, as he suggests here, couldn't he have learned about it in 7 years? That's a fair inference. If he wants the inference the other way, that 2 weeks is not enough time for him to learn about his criminal record. And then he says this, you know, this whole school board is saying, here's what they say. Board member David Doherty said he is very surprised if Milton knew about Anthony's criminal history when he was hired. Hatter, Cleaves, Doherty, board president Stephanie Rob Martin, and board member Eric Levinette all said they remain confident in Milton. I don't think Milton leaving at this point is the answer, Leverett. Well, it would be if he's covering up, and they're not making any effort to find out. I think we're in the middle of some very important planning. Rob Martin said school officials already have moved on. Right now we are focused on the kids. You know, they bring the kids in again. Listen, here's what Hatter has to say. Flint Board of Education members said Tuesday that they believe Milton didn't know about Anthony's criminal background, and I mentioned that. Then here's a quote. We work with and are associated with a lot of people that we're unsure of what their backgrounds are. On a daily basis, said board member Raymond Hatter. And until someone goes through a criminal background check process like Anthony went through, those things might not be revealed. No kidding. Hello? That's the reason for the state law. Why didn't you follow it? You recognize the importance of it, but you ignored it. Now, we have, since that time, the warrant has been, or the charges have been made, and Milton has been located in Atlanta. And I think they're going to have trouble with this guy and getting him back. It's not going to come easy. But let me show you what was on television today. Can you play that one, please?
Has been given more time to turn himself into authorities. ABC 12's Matt Franklin live in our newsroom now with an update. Matt?
Karen, the Genesee County Sheriff says the deadline for Julius Anthony to surrender to investigators in Genesee County has been pushed back from today to Friday. ABC 12 has also learned that Anthony was scheduled to go before a judge in Fulton County, Georgia this morning. In 1996, Anthony was charged in Fulton County, Georgia with molesting a 3-year-old boy. 4 years later, he pled guilty to a lesser charge. The Genesee County Sheriff says the former administrator may now be trying to get that conviction off of his record. In the meantime, he is being charged with 3 felonies in Genesee County, one for not registering as a sex offender while living in Michigan and for not notifying authorities when he moved back to Georgia. Anthony came to the Flint Community Schools just over a year ago, first as a consultant by Superintendent Dr. Walter Milton. Then he was hired on by the board as Executive Director of Curriculum and Instructional Services. In September, he resigned from the district. An ABC 12 investigation later found a background check revealed Anthony had been charged with a sex crime and had several inaccuracies in his professional and educational background on the application he submitted to the district. In the meantime, the Genesee County Sheriff says Julius Anthony now has 5 days to surrender to authorities, or he will send investigators to Georgia and bring him back to Genesee County. Live in the news, Matt Franklin, ABC 12 News.
Yeah, I think the unfortunate part is we let him get away from here 2 months ago when he was still here, and we knew that he had violated the law. He should have been arrested then. There shouldn't have been the procrastination of charging him or not charging him. Because if you don't charge him, we're back to the George Creer case. And you know, it would seem to me that this board ought to have been down there asking to appear at that press conference with Paquel and Leighton, raising hell about these people, this Anthony being hired, and how did it happen, and if they're responsible for part of it, then they should take the responsibility instead of saying, make it go away. You know, this is the same thing that happened in the George Creer case. Remember, that's the case where the music teacher at Whittier School sexually assaulted young girls over probably a 10-year period over there before he was caught. Now, once he's caught, this is the Flint Board of Education, again, takes him in and says, here's what you were doing, and we don't want a lot of publicity on this. It would not be good. All these girls coming in and having to testify. Look, if you resign, we won't put in your record that you left, that you had this problem with young girls and that you were sexually assaulting them. And this was a great deal for Creer. So he says, yeah, he'd buy to that. So they covered it up in their records. The guy goes to Florida and starts the same thing all over again, sexually assaulting young girls over a 10-year period. One girl has committed suicide. She was so distraught. All because the Flint Board of Education tried to cover this up. And that's what many of them, I think, want to do with this. Get rid of it so we don't have to deal with it. Send him someplace else, like Atlanta or wherever. Let them deal with him. Let him assault some people down there. And let him arrest him down there and prosecute him down there. And we won't have to hear about it anymore. You know, that shouldn't be allowed. This board should recognize the seriousness about this. These board members saying, hey, we're past that, we're moving on. What do you mean you're moving on? What have you done to make sure this doesn't happen again? Have you done anything? Are you fingerprinting everybody before you hire him? There's an indication you're not. There's an indication that you're hiring people and then sending in their fingerprints. And it might be a month, it might be 2 months before it comes back. You don't hire anybody, in my opinion, before they're fingerprinted and their record is well known. So they're not doing that already. They're not doing it. They're making exceptions. They haven't learned a lesson. And we may be hearing about this problem again, unfortunately. the board should have been raising hell about this, and instead they just try to cover it up. Typical Flint Board of Education responses in this case. And you know, and I'm not suggesting they're bad people. I'm suggesting they're not standing up to their responsibility and acknowledging what they've done, what mistakes they've made. I think the public would appreciate that. Well, let's go on. You know, this week, I guess it was last week, the end of last week, we had the story on the ripoff that's in the making by 3 former and 1 present city council person on tax money that they have received illegally. They've been ordered by the court to repay the illegally obtained taxpayers' money, and that it be returned forthwith, immediately. This was 1.5 years, 2 years ago, and nothing's been done. Now, this program files a Freedom of Information Act. As soon as we file it, 2 days later, the Attorney General sends a letter to the city of Flint. Now, we know that's more than a coincidence. It's all right. We don't care, as long as we got it moving where the taxpayers can get their money back. Why did it take our FOI almost 2 years later to cause them to act? Here's Channel 12's, I think it's 12's report on this. Can you play that, please?
The city of Flint says it's ready to collect more than $80,000 from several current and previous city council members. Good evening. Thanks for joining us. I'm Joel Fike.
And I'm Angie Hendershot. Nearly 2 years after an Ingham County judge ordered members of council to repay money they awarded themselves, tonight the city of Flint says at least 5 city council members have not paid up. ABC 12's Matt Franklin live tonight at City Hall with more. Matt?
Angie, late this afternoon, the mayor's office released 5 letters from the Michigan's Attorney General's office that were sent to those council members telling them that they have until Wednesday to pay back the money. Now, according to the letters, current Councilman Scott Kincaid owes more than $17,800. Current councilperson Carolyn Sims owes just over $16,800. Former Councilman Johnny Coleman owes over $17,500. Former Councilman Ed Taylor owes nearly $18,000. And former Councilman Mark Horgan owes just over $16,600. Now, the mayor's office says that it will go after the money if it is not paid by the Wednesday deadline. This all stems from a resolution passed by the council in 2004 to reinstate more than $250,000 in back pay just 1 day after the state takeover and the city ended. Now, council salaries have been cut by former emergency financial manager Ed Kurtz. The council claimed Kurtz had no authority to do it, but after several court hearings, the judge ruled the money had to be paid back. Now, the city says it is going to uphold the current and former council members to the ruling.
So at this point, the judgment against them is final. The Attorney General has sent out communication to all those owing, and it at this point totals approximately $86,938. So the city will be seeking diligently to recoup these funds.
Now, I spoke to all 5 of those current and past council members by phone this afternoon. Johnny Coleman says that he has not received a letter from the Attorney General's office. Carolyn Sims and Mark Horgan declined to comment. Ed Taylor told me that he knows nothing about the judgment. And Scott Kincaid says that he did receive a letter and plans on sending in a check for the full amount by Wednesday. For Live at Flint City Hall, Matt Franklin, ABC 12 News.
Thank you, Matt. What?
Now, it's hard for me to believe this. Taylor says, I don't know anything about it. He was fighting it. He knows the court entered. There was articles in the article after article in the newspaper, story after story on television about this rip-off of the taxpayers and the fact that the court had ordered him to pay it back. Now, and I see where the mayor now is going to do something. He promised 2 years ago to do something. Why did we take 2 years to collect the taxpayers' money? And I'm suggesting to you very strongly it's more than a coincidence that they've now acted after we filed our Freedom of Information. Now, we mentioned about 4 weeks ago on this program that that money hadn't been paid back. We knew that Carolyn Sims hadn't. You know, how can they make a statement? No comment. Carolyn Sims making a comment, no comment. How can you? That's not reasonable. You owe the money, pay it back. You say, yes, I'm going to pay it back. Not no comment. Come on, you've had that money. You were hoping it'd go away. It's not going away. I hope the mayor this time follows through like he promised 2 years ago and get the money back. Belongs to the people. You know, they say, well, something in the paper about them, they have some tax things, and hey, I don't want to hear that. You illegally obtained, and they have the amounts in there, $16,000, $17,000, $18,000. You illegally obtained it. Pay it back. I don't want to hear about taxes or anything. If you overpaid your taxes because you got the money illegally and you declared it, make a request for a reimbursement from the tax people. Don't hold the taxpayers of Flint responsible for your illegal act. Be interested to see what happens Wednesday. That's tomorrow, the deadline. And also next Friday to see what happens with this guy Anthony. Why they're giving him an extended time, I don't know. He doesn't deserve it. He's a liar. He's a cheat. He's a person who his whole application here was a lie. Why you give guys time like that? I don't know. But anyway, let's get the money back. Now here's the story. It's if you're a politician and a mayor of a city, you love this kind of a story. It says here, surplus a start. This is in the editorial of the Flint Journal. Flint financial recovery aids economic development. A congratulatory Happy New Year greeting should be resonating through Flint as residents learn that for the second consecutive year, the city will have a budget surplus. The climb back from insolvency to an $8.9 million fund balance has been rough and replete with embarrassing moments. But it is now clear that the city found within itself the leadership and collective will to regain its independence after the disgrace of the state oversight. Remember, that's where former Governor Engler appointed financial manager to guide the city out of debt that some estimated to be $40 million. So, you know, that's something that every politician who's running for office, in this case mayor for re-election, would love to see. And I'm sure you'll see that many times over in the campaign, and rightfully so. While there are many other deficiencies that will be pointed out, and we've pointed them out on this program, and the fact that there was nothing done about that, getting that money back for 2 years until we filed our FOI, those are deficiencies that should be pointed out too. But hopefully tomorrow, I hope that if that money isn't there, those lawsuits are started. Garnishments, attachments, whatever. Get the money back. Now, I see where Bob Emerson is going to be the new budget czar for Governor Granholm. I just think it's a good choice. I think he's very knowledgeable, knows a lot about the legislative process, knows those people down there, and can be very helpful to her in processing those cases. Incidentally, you remember the Collardi case, the fellow that with the Flint Police Department who allegedly kidnapped some woman? At least the allegations made to that, and there's a lawsuit started over it. And he was originally, the investigation was made by the Flint Police Department. He was fired. Now he's been rehired. What a joke that is down there. And then the guy out in Argentine, can you believe this? He's been put back on. He's the fella that allegedly asked a woman after she was stopped with her cousin to show him 2 good reasons why her cousin shouldn't be arrested and put in jail, because there was a bench warrant for him, and she pulled up her blouse and showed her breasts, and he let the guy go. That guy's been put back on duty. And here's something we've just learned. When he was approached by his chief, when the complaint was made to the Argentine Police Department about this matter, he was asked whether or not this was true, that what the woman described was true, that she did show him the breasts and he let the fella go, and he asked if she could show a couple of reasons, and that's what happened. He took the Fifth Amendment, according to the chief of police. Now, come on. If this is true, the guy shouldn't be on the police department. And the other side of the coin also is, or the additional fact, I should say, in this matter is, how safe do women feel driving through Argentine Township? I mean, these politicians out there, obviously this guy's a close friend of the politicians, probably on the same side as those politicians, and incidentally, the majority are Democrats. Something should be done about that. They ought to recall all those Democrats out there who put this guy back to work. I say that as a Democrat. So, you know, all of that should be done, and it isn't being done. But that's right. And then they have one guy that comes in, I thought was interesting, from Shiawassee County. The Sheriff's Department says, well, the reason the guy trying to justify why he didn't arrest him and take him to jail on the bench warrant is that Genesee County won't accept those people like Shiawassee. Well, the bench warrant, friend, was from Shiawassee. So you didn't cover your ass on this. You're wrong. So trying to cover up for the guy doesn't work when you don't know what the facts are. Well, anyway, we have a number of other things we should discuss with you that we'll have to put off till next week. And hopefully we have things we got to watch this week. We got to watch tomorrow to see if the money is paid back, and we have to watch Friday to see if this guy, Anthony, is coming back to Flint, or are they going to have to go after him. We'll see you next week. In the meantime, we'll be at the White Horse.